This is The Raid, exposing the dark world of America's deportation machine. I'm your host, John Carlos Frey. Jasmine Garsd is an Argentine-American journalist. She's currently NPR's immigration correspondent and the host of The Last Cup. She started her career as the co-host of Alt Latino, an NPR show about Latin music. Throughout her reporting career, she's focused extensively on women's issues and immigrant communities in America. She's currently writing a book of stories about women that she's met throughout her travels. Her latest piece on NPR is entitled, "Fearing Deportation, Undocumented Parents Are Preparing to Leave Their Kids Behind." Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You had a couple of points that you don't think that we cover very often as journalists, and one dealing with the economic impact and the other with what's going to happen to families or children that are witnessing this or wrapped up in it. So why don't we start, because I'm sure that they kind of go hand in hand, but let's start with the economic impacts, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So what are you thinking is going to happen if we deport millions of people? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think there's two aspects to this. And I think what happens is, I even find myself struggling with this, which is there's so much daily news, there's so much daily crisis and daily catastrophe that as journalists, I talk to a lot of journalists and I find that I myself, you struggle to do the big picture stuff, the tectonic shifts that are happening to us culturally and economically. And I think on an economic level, look, we're already seeing the most recent numbers are not healthy numbers. The most recent job growth and unemployment, this promise that if we deported all these people, white Americans would go in and take those jobs. That is clearly not true. Now, economists I've spoken to say it's a mix of tariffs and it's also the deportation campaign. We've lost somewhere around 1.5 million workers from the labor force. Right. That's not chump change, and so that is going to have an economic impact. Also, it's interesting. Economists I've spoken to have told me fear doesn't make for a good economy. If you are afraid of going out of your house and purchasing goods, that is not economic health. You yourself were mentioning earlier off mic in this neighborhood, stores closing down. That doesn't make for a healthy economy. That's one thing I think is going to be the big story in 2026. But I think there's something else to talk about, bigger picture, which is what this is going to do to mobility, to social mobility. And I think there's this big misconception, which is maybe not misconception, but this myth or stereotype that immigrant families don't have social mobility, that they stay where they are. And that is completely untrue. They actually have some of the largest social and educational mobility of any group in the U.S.
Some of the wealthiest people in this country are immigrants. First generation immigrants can amass great wealth in a generation. So
I'll give you an example. Earlier this year, I got a tip about a pastor who was in detention in Florida. Guatemalan pastor, his name was Maurilio Ambrosio. In the U.S. for 30 years. Had a successful landscaping business, no criminal conviction, which is really most of the people who are in detention.
Vast majority.
74%.
Yeah.
He gets detained, horrific conditions, and he gets deported back to Guatemala. 3 of his kids, 2 of whom are teenagers, have had to join the labor force, have had to go to work. Educational plans, out the way. Personal plans, it's all about taking care of the family. One of his kids told me thinking about dropping out of high school. And we know this. We know this from the Obama years. There's an amazing economist, Chloe East, at the University of Colorado. And she studies the effects of deportations on communities. And I spoke to her a couple of days ago, and she told me that already this year, we have already seen young people, teenagers from mixed status families dropping out of school and joining the labor force.
And that's because dad is gone, primary breadwinner, and somehow they have to fill in the space that he occupied, right?
Yeah, and I think there's kind of like, I always hear this sort of like schadenfreude, like liberal schadenfreude of like, well, who's going to go pick the strawberries now? Stephen Miller's kids? No, like what we're seeing is, that it's like the children of the people who are being deported are having to go into the labor force at a really young age.
Yeah. There was a congresswoman, I can't think of her name off the top of my head, who said that they were going to get people who were sponging off of Medicaid to go in and pick the strawberries. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I remember that, yes. Well, it's this mythology that has been, even MAGA people will tell you, like, I've spent so much of this year in Florida with farmers, right? Who overwhelmingly the farmers I spoke to were MAGA. They voted for this. And when told about this idea of like, well, white American citizens are going to come and work in the fields, which by the way is a job that there's nothing wrong with that job.
Jasmine, nobody wants to go into that work. I've reported on farm workers for a lot of my career. Nobody wants that job. It's an entry-level job. It's a low-skill job. If I don't have papers, if I don't have an education, if I can't speak the language, I can take that job. But nobody wants it. It's hard work, and it doesn't pay well.
And that's where the issue of social mobility comes in, though. I recently was in Nebraska. Sorry, I'm like Waldo. I'm like...
I'll pin you down for a second here and there. I have like 9 questions already for you.
Well, I was recently in Nebraska, and I was at, I'm working a lot on stories about the meatpacking plants. And I was at one family's home, and these are meatpacking workers, and their papers are not in order. And what really struck me was I went into the dad's bedroom, and it was like an altar to the son's achievements. The son of this meatpacking worker is a human rights lawyer. And it was... Of
course he is.
And it was the graduation, all of the trophies. And so there's this idea that is really so old. It's like from the 1880s even, which is whatever group is coming is not going to assimilate, whether it's the Italians, whether it's the Irish. But it's the data shows otherwise. What I think is like the story now that we might be missing is how is this going to derail that trend of people really moving forward?
I think what makes America great is the immigrant spirit. If you think about before they get here, they're the kinds of people who don't put up with the conditions in their home country. They're not the people who stay put. They're the people who say, I'm not going to stand for this. I'm going to move my entire family to a place I don't speak the language. My educational system doesn't work there. I'm going to take whatever job I can get, and I'm going to make a difference. They're not going to hang out in a poor country that is war-torn or corrupt. That's the spirit that moves into America. And so, yes, they're industrious, they're entrepreneurial, they want their kids to succeed. And you're saying we're putting a big shotgun hole into all of it.
Yeah, also, look, I'm from South America. Like, I think it's important to say, much of Latin America has a system that is almost feudal. Like you will die in the place you were born, and oftentimes, especially for Latin Americans of color, indigenous Latin Americans, that is a very bad place.
There's no upward mobility.
No, and I over and over and over again, I have seen like these extraordinary stories of mobility, like literally from one generation to the next. I'm thinking of factory worker. Son is a biologist.
Let me do the counter argument because of what I just saw yesterday. The administration put out a Christmas card, a video Christmas card. I don't know if you saw it, and it's called Mass Deportation. And it's these fast-moving images. They're half a second each. They just kind of pepper the screen, and it's really hard to see which ones they are and what they are. They go by so fast. It's done to Christmas music, and it's called Mass Deportation. And it's basically these quick-moving images of what America will become once we get rid of them all.
And what will it become?
It was these beautiful images, black and white images of the 50s and baseball games and apple pie and hot dogs and Americana. For the most part, kind of peppered in with all these sort of Christmas scenes of snow and sledding and, what we used to be when immigrants didn't ruin the country. That, to me, is what the feeling of it is. So, I mean, I don't know that I've ever gotten a postcard or a Christmas card that says mass deportation on it.
Oh, well,
but that's the one they're sending.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say, it's counter to your argument, or it's counter to what you're saying, that what are we doing to this 15-year-old boy who all of a sudden has to take over for his dad who got deported? So what? They're saying, so what? He needs to go.
The 15-year-old boy who was born
All
in the
of them
U.S.?
need to go. All of them need to go. If you're brown, if you speak Spanish, if you're not white, if you're from a foreign country, you need to go.
First of all, this idea that immigration is new, you're in L.A., like there's a wealth of immigrant culture from like the 50s, the 40s,
It built the city.
Yes.
It's Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. I was driving up and I was like, oh, Santa
Everything's
Clara.
in Spanish.
But, I think this idea that it was better, well, better for who? And second, I would also say, my partner is Sicilian American, right? And the family, has these stories about immigration of, Papa coming from Sicily, from Italy. And Italians were treated, I'm a big history nerd, and I'm really interested in the culture of Italian Americans.
They were scum.
I've read legal documents in which they're referred to as white N-words, when they were being executed or, in the South. And what's really extraordinary to me to see is like that story of mobility played out, right? I mean, my partner I think he's the first one to be able to have gone, to get a tertiary education.
Right. But I'm not trying to argue with you necessarily, but you're saying that there's going to be a negative effect of this mass deportation.
I think it will be twofold. I think, first of all, it's not me. It's speaking to economists who have said it is too soon to know. And we also, we see a mix of the chaos of the tariffs and the deportations. But I've spoken to economists who have looked at the most recent economic picture, at the numbers, who have said, this isn't a good picture right here. And, in my work, I recently spoke to someone who owns a mechanic shop in Queens, who told me but the same thing, really, because you get these jobs like mechanics, and it's really a thermometer of the economy, right? Who said to me, between the tariffs and the fact that 3 mechanics got deported, and people are scared, so they're not really like going places, business isn't great. So I think that's one thing. And I think the other is social mobility. I mean, we can sit here and argue about immigration, but so many of the young people that I have spoken to who are American citizens are saying, I have to drop out of school now. I have to take a full-time job when I was hoping to take, maybe a full-time job and study. I have to take 2 jobs. The young woman, the pastor's daughter, 2 jobs now.
And she has to drop out of school. So whatever she was going to become or advance as, those dreams are gone.
She wanted to get some kind of business degree.
No,
right now, that's not happening. Right now, she overnight at age 19, she turned 20 a few months ago, she is a mother to 4 kids.
So the administration's zeal to deport or to do a mass deportation has shockwaves.
Yes, I think so. I think, there's a generation of young Americans who will experience this shockwave.
And you're saying that it's destructive.
Well, yes.
I know you're not saying, but your reporting sort of bears that out.
Yes, my reporting bears out. I mean, and again, it's sure we can act like this is unprecedented, and certainly to a certain degree it is. Like the numbers are
and the cruelty.
The cruelty, the postcards, the numbers. But I've spoken to enough people who are now adults, who went through some version of this during the Obama years or during the Bush years, who have told me this completely derailed my life emotionally, financially. This Colombian-American man I spoke to recently, he just told me it took a longer time to get my footing in life because of this, because I was on my own as a teenager in high school.
Let's just, for the sake of argument, do the flip side of this, because
Okay.
there's also economic data to prove that deportation, mass deportation, is lucrative for some. You have private prisons, you have people who supply private prisons, the food companies, the clothing companies, the tech companies. There's all this surveillance equipment. The administration has just bought new planes to deport people. They just spent $1 billion on advertising to warn people to leave, and that went to some PR company. So with where the government is spending all of this money to deport people, somebody's getting rich.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's another big story that to tackle in 2026, which is we already have a mass incarceration economy in this country, right? But I think there is a new economy that is really booming, which, as you said, what is the number again?
$175 billion.
Billion, yes, for this, system that is, going to be detention centers, flights. And I guess, sure, that is going to be very lucrative for certain actors and certain people.
They're even paying migrants to go back home. Children now...
I'm yet to meet someone who has taken that.
For $2,500 for kids now to go back home.
Yeah, imagine that versus like a lifetime of...
No, it's a payoff for sure, but it's all about money. If you want to become an ICE agent, you could easily be making six figures, within a couple of years.
Here's what I would say about like an economy of mass detention, right? I think it's an economy of fear. And I think economies of fear come with their own price tag. I say that as the daughter of two people who had to leave during a very brutal dictatorship in Argentina. And I think economies of fear have their own price tag. And the price, we're already seeing that. There's a price to detention being what we produce, policing being what we produce. That's one thing I would say. And I think the other thing I would say is I think a lot of what we are seeing is concerning. 74% of people in immigration detention not having a criminal conviction should concern American citizens.
We're the largest jailers of immigrants in the world.
Yes, and also, we are seeing citizens, and we're seeing now this push for to denaturalize some people. And the goalposts keep changing. And I think if someone isn't a bit concerned about what this is doing to democracy and to the future of American citizens, they're not paying attention.
Well, the people in power aren't concerned. If I had Stephen Miller sitting where I am, he would refute everything you're saying.
Sure.
So who's right? You come from this background and you report on it, so I get your take.
Right.
But they don't believe in what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know who's right. The persons who stand to profit from mass detention, or
by billions.
Sure. it's true. If a billionaire who is right by their own perspective, but I don't, I'm not a reporter. I report about what is happening to everyday people.
So the ideology that if you got rid of the scourge, which is how they are portrayed,
yeah,
the criminals, the violent criminals, were going after the worst of the worst. But
that's not what's happening.
Of course it's not what's happening, but that's the rhetoric.
Right.
If you watch right-wing media or Fox News, they're not telling your story. They're not telling the economic disaster of deportation.
No, they're telling the story of the scourge and of this, plague. On the ground, what is happening is a sort of cosplay against a cosplay of war against the guy who does your landscaping and the woman who picks your strawberries. That is what I am seeing.
And I don't get why.
Because fear sells. Fear is an excellent selling point.
It's a political construct. It's a way to get votes or to get favor.
I mean, it certainly has worked, right?
Clearly.
This is, as you said, it is, from a political standpoint, this has been extraordinarily profitable.
He got reelected.
By a lot of Latinos. Do you know how many people I speak to who have family now in detention
who voted
for this? I'm actually, I can't do more stories about it because it's so many that it almost becomes repetitive.
It's not a surprise, though, even to them, because during the convention, they had signs up that said mass deportation.
But it is a surprise because they thought they were coming for that other bad person.
What is mass deportation?
That other bad person. I'm not the bad person.
Not my family?
No, and so when we're saying, it's not, for some points of view, this is fine. This is working. Yeah, a lot of those points of view voted for this.
I don't know if you know this, but I want to ask it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
We're almost a year in, and it's been pretty brutal.
Mm-hmm.
And thank God for phones, because that's where we're seeing most of it, the way that people are being detained. Where are we going to be economically, if we're still on the economic topic, 2 years out? You've gotten rid of 5 million workers. Some people have self-deported. The fields are empty. The factories can't find workers. What, collapse?
I mean, I've read at least one reliable economic forecast that has said that by 2027, we're going to start, there's going to be a counter move to reopen to immigrants, to immigration labor. I mean, we're already starting to see it, though. You're already starting to see in the numbers opinion shifting. You're starting to see more people saying immigration is a positive for the U.S. I'm starting to see it. I mean, I interview people who voted for this, who were very staunch about this during the election, who are saying, well, I'm not comfortable, or this is affecting my bottom line, right? Going back to this mechanic in Queens. This is affecting my bottom line. And, I don't think that's surprising. I think we see these cycles in the U.S. if you look through history, right? I mean, there's some pretty, great ethnographies about how, back to the Italians, right? Back to Italian-Americans, they were pretty reviled until around World War II, where there's this movement of like, oh, patriots, Italian-American patriots. And so Americans have always historically run very hot and cold on immigration. I think when I say that, I risk sounding like a person who's saying this has, always been the case. I do think there's an element of unprecedented cruelty in what we're seeing right now. But it's not completely unprecedented. We've run hot and cold on immigration in the past. I
spoke to, do you know the organization MALDEF?
Of course, yes.
I spoke to the president of MALDEF a few days ago on the podcast. And he believes that this is a political construct. It is disguised as we need to get rid of the worst of the worst.
Sure.
But Latinos are the fastest growing voter population in the country. And they're gaining power faster than they can gerrymander for the most part. And the writing is on the wall that whoever the Republican Party is or white supremacy is over for the most part. So we need them gone. We need them tamped down. We need them controlled. Do you see it that way too, that this is a political act to try and scare ethnic minorities?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think, again, it's in the numbers that it's political, right? It's because it proves time and again that it really rallies people, and I think it is. I mean, and if you think about it, going back to this point about like, well, it is working or it is successful. Sure. I mean, this is a campaign that got Latinos to vote essentially against Latinos. Right. And I think, we're at the end of a year in which I have spent most of it covering pretty horrific human rights abuses. Right. And so I always have this hesitation towards talking about people as labor. And I've spent this year talking to people who have gone through periods of time in which their spouse or son is disappeared, is missing. And so to talk about that person as solely as labor, I mean, I spent time with a woman in in Fort Lauderdale, who she went on a fishing trip, and her husband and her got detained because they didn't have a driver's license. And he disappeared for like 3 days. And she was up for 3 days just wondering, where the fuck is my husband? Right. And she gets a call on like day 4 and around like in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m. or something. And he's at Alligator Alcatraz. And so, while it's important to talk about the economy, and it's really important to talk about like intergenerational wealth and mobility, we're also talking about people who, regardless of one's thoughts about immigration, I think we've, I guess up until recently, decided that our consensus in this country is that we don't disappear people.
So you want to jump into the other one, which is what it does to the families, what it does to children?
I remember talking to a woman, a young woman in New York about the Obama years and this story, right, of that she would fall asleep at night she would sleep in the living room and she would fall asleep looking at the door because she was worried ICE agents would bust in. And that she developed like a really bad anxiety, like she carries that as an adult. This is an American woman. I mean, again, we're on the same page. Nobody should develop an anxiety disorder as a child. But I think even like there's these little indicators that this is happening in a very serious way. And it is, I think, tied to the social mobility issue. There's another study that came out not so long ago about attendance in California in kindergarten and how it's dipped. And you might say, well, it's kindergarten. Wait, you didn't get to do your building blocks that day. But first, I mean, that says so much about where someone is heading, that early education.
You mean that kids aren't showing up for school?
Yes. And we've seen this. I've talked to teachers in Chicago who have seen this. Based
on the fact that parents are afraid to take their kids to school, or they're afraid their kids are going to get deported?
No, take their kids. Like I've spoken to parents who are concerned about taking their kids to school, that it's a hunker down situation.
So mom isn't going to go driving their kids to school or walk their kids to school because they don't want to be out in public.
Yeah.
Or be seen.
And there's these networks that exist. I spent some time with a couple of them in D.C., in Washington, D.C., where like citizen parents are stepping in and taking the kids to school.
Because ICE is targeting these places now, which they didn't before.
Nearby. I mean, certainly almost as soon as this administration stepped in, one of the first things they did was clear away the policy, which is you can no longer go into hospitals. You're not going to go into schools and places of worship. Almost immediately.
Those are
gone. And almost immediately I started to talk to people who were like, I don't know if I'm going to get prenatal care. I don't know about like picking my kid up to school. What could happen? And so far, I should say, there haven't been raids in schools. There was one situation, I believe, near Chicago or in Chicago, where somebody, a teacher got followed into the school.
Preschool teacher was taken out.
But it's still in the area, if you're a couple of blocks away, that's really terrifying for parents.
One of the things that bothers me quite a bit is this idea that a family unit, mother, father, 3 kids, let's say, have had the discussion already. What are we going to do when mom gets taken?
Yeah.
What are we going to do when both parents are gone? They have a plan.
Of course, yeah, there is.
But you say,
plan.
Of course.
Yeah.
But any white American family doesn't have a plan for when mom and dad disappear.
Yeah.
Who are we going to go live with? That's already decided. When they get deported, if you were my sister, we would know where we're going to end up if mom and dad get deported. What kind of a fucking family discussion is that?
It's an extremely common one. I mean, it's, I would say at this point, most families I speak to who are of mixed status, and even some who aren't, who know that right now, like, we've seen cases of people who are citizens getting caught up, are having or have had that discussion. One of the stories I did towards the end of this year was families designating emergency guardians. Families saying, okay, I'm going to sign paperwork to so-and-so, and if I get deported, you go with her and she has legal guardianship. Lawyers are encouraging people to do that. Lawyers, for example, in Florida are going to different community centers and churches and encouraging and talking to people about sign that paperwork, have a plan B, because you don't want it to be, it's almost like someone described it to me as writing your will.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. And because we hear these, I mean, last year I interviewed this guy in Long Island in New York, and he was telling me about how, one day he came home and mom wasn't there. And he just was suddenly a father to his younger sibling. And so we have seen cases. There's also that actress from Orange is the New Black.
Diane Guerrero.
Yes, Diane Guerrero. And she experienced that, and she's been super vocal about that. And so what lawyers are encouraging right now is sign this, like have a plan.
What happens to children if we don't have a plan? We haven't had that discussion. We haven't signed the paper, and mom and dad get taken. The government doesn't do anything to advocate for children left behind.
So the lawyer I spoke to, who is in Central Florida, who just goes around kind of giving advice on how to do this to families, has said, what she told me is you don't want to not have that paperwork because your kids can end up in the system. They can end up in foster care.
So if I have underage children who are left behind, mom and dad get deported or get detained, the government doesn't say anything about those kids, right? They're on their own, or they become a ward of the state or the federal government.
Right, ward of the state. The guy I interviewed in Long Island, I think he was 17, and they moved really quick and kind of went off the radar, off the grid. But yes, like if you're 12 or 11, you can become a ward of the state, which is why, people are really telling families, do the plan B. I know this isn't something you want to think about, but you should. That's the advice.
I mean, so a deportation or an apprehension completely destroys that entire family. Because, what kind of a life is a kid going to have in foster care? We know what the foster care system is like for kids, right?
Absolutely. And so we go back to this this topic of today, which is derailment, which is the derailment of a generation of young American children. And I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it every day in my reporting in different kinds of stories that people tell me, whether it's the fear, whether it's, a panic disorder, whether it's financial, whether it's I wanted to go to business school, I'm going to put that off for a while. I see that. What
happens to kids emotionally? Let's just say that the family unit is gone and you're saying that the kids have to kind of pick up the slack. They have to go to work. They have to derail their college plans. All of that sounds sort of on the surface what needs to happen. But are they going to have emotional problems? Are they going to have some kind of trauma-based issues when they get older? Or are they going to turn to drinking? Or it feels to me like there's a destruction of the human spirit going on here.
Well, I think it's two parts. Like I think I've been able to interview people who went through the Obama and Bush years, and this is super important that we talk to people who are adults now, because we talk about unaccompanied minors and DACA kids, and a lot of those kids are actually like in their 40s now. And I think on the one hand, so many people I've spoken to have told me this just really did a number on me.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
This caused, again, like some kind of a panic disorder or deep anxiety, or in the case of this Colombian man who told me, it took me a lot longer to get my footing than other kids who hadn't gone through this.
The only thing that I can think of, because you and I have been in this space for a while and we're kind of inundated by it, I don't fully understand the logic because there's no logic behind it. The only thing I can think of psychologically is that hate of the other, which is what a lot of this is fueled by.
Of course.
Blinds you from reason. You don't think reasonably. So if kids in cages and the sound of chains and a child crying affected you negatively before, and you said, this is too much, I don't want this anymore, but you continue to hate, you'll block that out. That's just my understanding. If you continue to hate, I'm not thinking reasonably. I can think that those immigrants are going to rape my daughter or take my job.
An old racial trope as well.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And then I can get myself to believe that. So it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if I separate them from their children. It doesn't matter that I destroy a family unit because I'm cleaning America. That Christmas card was all about those wholesome images. Once we get rid of the scourge...
Well, and it's also, there's a racial undertone.
It's purely racial.
Yes.
It's purely racial. The images in that Christmas card were happy white people. Mm-hmm. So if I really believe that my problems are because of those brown faces, then I'm okay with it.
Which also explains so much of the Latin vote, in my opinion.
But explain.
I was doing some work in Queens on street vendors, interviewing street vendors, and everyone's really scared right now. What's going to happen? It's been super cold in New York these days. I got an Uber to go back home. And the driver is an Ecuadorian guy. And I tell him what I was doing there, and he says, gotta get them all out. And
Someone
I asked
from Ecuador said.
And I asked, what's your story? And he said, well, I was undocumented for a while. And it just, it's this, I have this conversation over and over and over again. And it's really something.
I think that this kind of rhetoric appeals to our lowest common denominator. Mm. If I am undocumented, mm-hmm. and I can hate on you, that makes me higher up on the totem pole. I'm better than you. You're still undocumented. I fixed my status, so I get a leg up on you. I'm better than you. It kind of appeals to that base part of our humanity. I think at the base of this for me, and this is purely philosophical, but it's also a political construct, that if you can scare people enough, if you can instill fear in the general population, you're controlling them. This is a control tactic. If I can scare you enough, I can do whatever I want on the side, behind your back. That's what authoritarianism is. Look what just happened with 60 Minutes. I mean, they didn't run a story about the Sikot prison. They pulled it out of fear of retaliation from the federal government. So fear creates a sense of control. Let's scare brown people so they may not vote anymore.
But with the Sikot thing, I mean, so many people I've spoken to have told me, I don't want to get sent to Sikot. It only had to be done once to send a message.
That's it.
This is a personal anecdote. I was having coffee with my dad the other day. My dad lived through some of the Argentine dictatorship. He was lucky enough to leave. And he was telling me the story that he's never told me. He's old enough in that he's able to tell me some stories now. I guess he just wants it out there. And he was telling me about the story of the neighborhood he grew up in, which is like more in the country, and people getting pulled out of their houses and killed. And he says to me, and do you know what the neighbors did?
So when someone
through the blinds,
they witness somebody getting pulled out of their house and assassinated in front of them, they draw their blinds?
The level of fear.
They don't want to be involved. They don't want to see anything.
It's not even see. It's like there's a real fear there.
That is control.
Of course, because you could go the same way.
So you kill that one person, it affects the entire neighborhood, and you've got control not just of the family that you terrorized or killed the head of the household, but you've got the entire neighborhood now under your thumb.
I cannot tell you the amount of conversations that I have had with people who have told me, I don't want to get accidentally sent to Sikot. I don't want to get sent to Uganda. So it sent a really clear message.
And I think it's part of the plan. Authoritarians need to have control over the majority of the population in order to do, what are they going to do? Take over, enrich themselves, corrupt the system, break the system? They have to have control first. Otherwise, the people are going to retaliate.
Well, I think we are also, going back to an earlier question, there's a lot of money to be made out of fear.
That's what this is about, it feels like to me. It's a power grab and a money grab.
Because that's, we're talking about economies of fear, right? There's a lot of money to be made by certain sectors in economies of fear.
Right.
It's not bad for everyone. It's very lucrative for some.
So we touched a little bit about this issue about the choice that they're offering immigrant families. You don't have to be separated from your parents. You can go with them. Describe to me in your reporting, if you have it, if the entire family unit is returned back to Guatemala, what kind of a life are those kids going to have? I mean, they left for a reason. And then if the only offer, and we'll give you a little bit of money to go too,
Right.
We'll give you some money to go home, what are they going back to?
Well, that's a really interesting question because, first of all, I haven't met anyone who has taken this because
the percentages are like under 10% of the people who've been offered money to be returned or to self-deport. I mean, $2,500 is not a small amount for some of these families, and it would go a long way in Central America, but they're not taking it.
I think this idea that you're going back to something worse is, on the one hand, yes, like I have spoken, like early on, I recorded a conversation between a young Venezuelan man he was tapping out of detention. He just wasn't getting enough food in Florida detention.
And tapping out means he's going to go back to Venezuela.
He asked for deportation, even though he was in some stage of asylum claim.
If he would have waited it out and toughed it out.
6 more months. He'd already been in the system for a year.
He might have been able to stay in the U.S.
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe not. But we're talking about he was already at a year. It was at least going to be 6 more months. The food was sometimes, this detention center I've reported on, I've heard people say you get a cup of rice for like lunch. Sometimes there's no food because the food is bad, like it's rotten. And I recorded a conversation in which he was telling his mom, Ma, I can't do this anymore. I cannot psychologically or physically do this anymore. And so, yes, it is true that that man, who, by the way, like pawned everything to come to the U.S., he is going back to who knows what. He's going back to Venezuela, to an authoritarian regime. No money. The judge, when he talked to her, he said, what if you accidentally send me to CCOT? And she responded, well, then you email me.
How's he going to be able to do that? From CCOT.
And so, I don't know, in Spanish, what's that saying in Spanish? Saltó de la sartén al fuego?
From the fire into the frying pan, or the frying pan into the fire?
It's both bad options.
Yeah. That is the life of migrant. It's an optionless life. I don't have the luxury, I don't have the option to be entrepreneurial. I don't have the option to go to college. I don't have the option to be free. I only have the option of a shitty life in the United States, being hunted down by ICE, or a shitty option being returned back to Venezuela. Those are my options as migrant.
But so many migrants, I had this conversation the other day with a colleague. Yes, so many migrants come to the U.S. knowing my life will be somewhat better than where I am, but it's going to be really difficult. But the promise that pretty much every single person I've spoke to has said to me is, but my kids.
That's right.
But my kids are going to go to school.
Yeah.
My kids won't get killed.
It's all about the better life.
My offspring will do better. And so when we talk about derailment, then that's no longer there.
That's my mother. My mother was that person who brought me to the United States and sacrificed her own personal well-being for my good.
Where did she come from?
Mexico.
What part?
Mazatlan, Sinaloa. But she didn't have an education. She didn't speak English. She was a housekeeper. She worked odd jobs. And I went to college. I went to college on her back. And she was not, she worked her ass off for my well-being. So, yeah. But the migrant themselves, the person who does the actual labor, is the person who's stuck between a rock and a hard place or fire in the frying pan.
And that's understood. Like, I think among migrants I've spoken to, I've spoken to people as they're like crossing the border. And I've asked, like, what do you think it's going to be like? And there's not this idea of like, overwhelmingly, people are like, I'm going to work my ass off.
That's right. They have an opportunity.
I had one person once tell me that Boston, she thought it was going to look like Dubai, which I was like, oh man.
She's never been to Boston.
But overwhelmingly, it's, I'm going to work my ass off. But my kids.
So one last sort of
Please.
Big pool of philosophy or your understanding of this world of migration and immigration. We're not really solving any problems here. That's my take, and I want your take. That mass deportation throws people back into the fire from the frying pan. Mass deportation just shifts the problem geographically. At best, it just takes a class of people or a group of people and puts them back in a place where they're not going to want to stay again. They might even try to get back into the United States. It's this whole back and forth, cat and mouse. But the issues that cause migration, whether it's poverty, civil unrest, government corruption, even climate change now is forcing people from Latin America, and we can focus on Latin America. None of those issues have been resolved. Stabilizing economies or governments, addressing climate change or famine, poverty, none of those issues. So I don't see mass deportation doing anything positive.
We talked about like political gain, right? Which is, I don't know. You might debate me on this, but I think political gain can be inherently very short-sighted.
Always.
I started doing this during the Obama years. I was a translator. And, you asked me about some predictions for the next few years. During the Obama years, what you saw so clearly was people being sent back, coming back up, sent back. It was like a revolving door. Now that's gotten a lot harder, but at least anecdotally, what I've heard, for example, in Tijuana is the shelter's pretty empty, with the exception of people who have been deported after like 30 years of living in California, and they don't want to go so far away from their families. That's anecdotal, like from people I've talked to at shelters. But I think we are bound to see at some point a revolving door element of, if you got deported and you have like 2 or 3 kids here, you might try and come back at some point. As for the solving of the issues, look, on both sides, what's astounding is talking to people who are, have voted for this and who have said, we need immigration reform. And, you talk to Democrats and they need immigration reform too. So there is an understanding that it is a fundamentally broken system. I started this job at NPR when the big influx of immigrants were coming through the border. I started off working in Jacamba in like these open air detention sites out by the border on the U.S. side.
Jacamba, for everybody, is a desert town in
tiny desert
east
town.
of San Diego in California.
And it was these, there would be like 1,000 people a day just sitting out in the desert waiting to get picked up. And I think something that was very much lost, you had 2 narratives. You had the Dickensian parade of miseries, and then you had the invaders are here. But what was really lost was a world that was convulsing, a world where there have never been more displaced people. That's according to the UN.
Yes.
A world where there were authoritarian regimes, where there was climate change, where gangs were asking you for la vacuna, for I don't know how you say la vacuna, your bribe, your monthly payment. And I think that was lost. Like there was no discussion of like this world that, you know, woke up from the COVID fever dream and it was convulsing. And, you know, that world, it remains, you know, we're at this place globally where there is an enormous amount of have-nots who are doing worse than ever. And, you know, someone from, I don't know, it was a scholar of immigration was telling me the other day, I think it might have been from the Migration Policy Institute, in as long as conditions here are less hellish than conditions there, human survival will dictate that people leave. That's like genetics.
People will come here. If it's just remotely better than where they are now, they will migrate.
That is like the essence of human nature, is to survive. That's how we got this far.
So if we spend $175 billion to get rid of people and send them back to places that are less than desirable to be at, we've wasted the money. They're on their way back. Whether it's next year or in a few years, they're going to come back.
I mean, we've seen historically that immigration doesn't cease because it's like written in the human genetic code to survive.
I have this concept that let's just call the problem that we have in this country, at least by the administration calls it a problem, that there are too many illegals here.
Right.
That's their term. I think they even use the number, which is insane, like 20 to 30 million people. And they blame them for all of the ills of society. But I have an understanding that there was a tacit, illicit, come and work in our fields, come and work in our factories, come and work in our construction sites. There was a big grab of cheap labor for decades that nobody was going after the owners of farms or the owners of factories for a long time. And all of a sudden, from one administration to the next, they're all here illegally.
Decades, like I just took the California Railroad. Who built that?
All of that. We brought them here to work.
Right. And that's where I'm like the cosplay against the person who has been doing your landscaping for like, even like someone, didn't Joe Rogan recently say like, you got to tackle like the 60-year-old landscaper?
Do you?
I mean.
But who hired that landscaper? I mean, we've been hiring them for decades and then all of a sudden they were inconvenient.
Right.
Nothing changed. Nothing changed except an ideology and a rhetoric. Nothing changed. There isn't more crime. They aren't raping more women. They aren't taking more jobs. All of a sudden, they became scourge just because somebody said so.
I think about this woman from Chad who was an OBGYN, and she spoke English, French, and Spanish because she had studied in Cuba. I, as a woman, like, I feel the OBGYN shortage. You know, it's a real thing. I remember some of these people. I think about this Brazilian guy I met who was a solar panel installer. I met a Venezuelan woman who was studying terapia física, physical therapy. What if there had been a system where it was like, you are needed here, you are needed there. But it was politics. There was like truly like expert political maneuvering where everyone got sent to like New York and Martha's Vineyard, and you know, like that's not what happened. A sane and sober
system, yeah.
But then we go to this idea of the payoff of politics.
I did a story about labor contractors in the fields of California, where buses would be sent to the border to pick up workers because it was harvest time and they didn't have enough workers in the field. So they would pay a contractor, one man, to organize labor from Mexico, undocumented workers, to come and finish the harvest and then send them back after a couple of months of doing the harvest. So they're convenient when we need them, and then they're criminal when we want to politically grandstand, is what it seems like to me.
There's this landscaper in Chicago, Mexican guy, and I spoke to him. He was in hiding in his house. This was before the raid start. And he said this to me with such bitterness. He just said, I'm going to say it in Spanish first, cuando querían sus florecitas en su lugar, ahí no tenían quejas, right? Like, You had no complaints when you wanted me to, for a very low price, put your flowers. But now, like, you want to cosplay war against, like, your dishwasher and landscaper.
Yeah, that's why it's not really based in reality. It's based on a political construct.
Yes, and the reality, I think, of political power, racial fears, those things are real in America. That's very real.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to The Raid, available wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about our guests and the subjects we cover, please visit our website at theraidpodcast.org.